Following a firebombing campaign that destroyed many Japanese cities, such as Tokyo, the Allies prepared for a costly invasion of Japan that would not only incur major debts but also many casualties on both sides. The war in Europe ended when Nazi Germany signed its surrender on May 8, 1945, but the Pacific War continued. Together with the United Kingdom and China, the United States called for an unconditional surrender of Japanese armed forces in the Potsdam Declaration on July 26, 1945, threatening prompt and utter destruction. However, the Japanese didn't take their ceasefire terms and the war waged on, until that one unspeakable second in early August 1945. Following this, the world was changed forever. Since 1942, a secret U.S. weapons program called the Manhattan Project had been at work on two revolutionary bombs of such intense heat and explosive force they would reduce the two target cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to vast scorched wastelands. But it was their radioactivity, which remained deadly long after the debris settled and the smoke cleared, that changed our world forever.
On August the 6th, 1945, two American Superfortress bombers arrived over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on the world's most devastating military mission. The Enola Gay, with Colonel Paul Tibbets at the controls, was about to drop the first atomic bomb, a weapon conceived by a group of international scientists based at Los Alamos in the United States. So far, no one knew exactly what effect the bomb would have, either on the unsuspecting inhabitants below or on the crew of the plane itself. They were soon to find out.
The bomb went off, the whole inside of the airplane just lit up as if someone had set off a flashbulb. And then we had to wait, and this was our big worry, is what would the blast do when the blast got to the airplane? And finally the blast did arrive. It was like being in an ash can and getting someone kicking. And then we crowded to the window and saw just the whole city completely covered in smoke with this very tall mushroom cloud rising from it.
President Truman had already threatened the Japanese with a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. When the truth was revealed, his words seemed an understatement. Buildings vaporized, so did the clothes on people's backs. Was it a bomb that should never have been dropped? Some people thought so. Others argued that it shortened the war and kept the subsequent peace. One thing was not in doubt. Hiroshima taught mankind the awful truth about nuclear weapons and just what horror they could bestow.
The death toll for both Hiroshima and Nagasaki was between 190,000 and 200,000. Upon the explosion, 90% of the people within a 1,600-foot radius of ground zero were killed. 66% of the people within a mile radius of ground zero were killed, and 10% of the people who were outside a 2.5-mile radius were also killed from the explosion. As depicted in both of the following graphs, the further away from ground zero, a lower percentage of deaths were present. Furthermore, most of the people close to ground zero received high radiation dosages and died immediately or during the first day. 1/3 of all fatalities occurred by the 4th day, 2/3 by the 10th day, and 90% by the end of the week. The cumulative death rate percentages in both cities rose dramatically during the first 2 weeks, then leveled off in subsequent weeks. The destruction that these bombs created was beyond anyone's imagination and is still taking its toll to this day. So we are now left with the question as to why Truman decided to drop this lethal bomb.
As history progresses, the reasons for dropping the atomic bomb become more complex.
There are many possible reasons why Truman might have decided to drop the bomb, not once, but twice, and today we're going to explore the details behind those reasons. The situation we're going to be discussing today is ending the war in a timely manner.
Many of the popular beliefs of historians and citizens alike include using the atomic bomb to end the war in a timely manner. This approach would theoretically save American and Japanese lives, since invasions would have taken place of the bombs. The Americans' view of World War II was a war that had gone on for too long. So the idea of the atomic bomb that would end the war quickly sparked the interest of the president due to his sinking popularity ratings.
The second subject that we're going to address today is the cost of the atomic bomb. The sheer cost of the Manhattan Project may have been an incentive.
Back in 1945, when the Manhattan Project was completed, it had accumulated a cost of around $2 billion, which today would be around $20 billion.
Also, since the project was hidden from the Congress and the public alike, failure would mean devastation. Both the project and the Truman administration would receive relentless criticism and investigation.
So it is no surprise that the vast amount of pressure and expense would be its own incentive for dropping the bomb.
The next thing that we will be talking about is the idea of total war.
Historians often describe World War II as a total war, a war that's unrestricted in terms of territory or combatants involved, weapons, or the objectives pursued. Justification for the atomic bomb is often referred back to the idea of total war and Japan's constant use of civilians as shields.
The dropping of the bombs on the two cities can also be justified by their involvement in the war. Hiroshima was a communications center, an assembly place for troops, and also had factories for producing military equipment.
Nagasaki played a major role due to its military factories that produced wartime machines and other military equipment.
These two cities were also a near-perfect model of total war due to the civilian involvement in their factories and communication centers.
A professor of modern philosophy at Tokyo's Catholic University, Father John A. Symes, wrote the following. We have discussed among ourselves the ethics of the use of the bomb. It seems logical to me that he who supports total war in principle cannot complain of a war against civilians.
However, the statement was contracted by the Tokyo District Court in December of 1963, when they stated, according, it is wrong to say that the distinction between military objectives and non-military objectives has gone out of existence because of total war. This shows that the opposing viewpoints regarding the idea of total war within Japan.
In Professor Bernstein's issue of Foreign Affairs, he describes World War II, especially in the Pacific, of a total war, thus involving the masses or civilians. He also goes on to say that the worst atrocities were perpetuated by the Axis, all the major nation-states sliced away at the moral code, often to the applause of their leaders and citizens alike.
In the end, some historians believed it was a total war that mass attacks on civilians are to be expected.
While others believe that America ignored the moral code and ethics by attacking the innocent people of Japan.
The next subject we're going to discuss is the idea of impressing the Soviets.
The use of the atomic bomb as a threat towards the Soviet Union has been considered the main idea by historians. Since the tensions between the U.S. and Russia continue to grow, with no common agreement in sight, Truman may have seen the opportunity to use the bomb to show the true power that the U.S. possessed.
As John Kiffner states in his article, the bombing was aimed at the wartime enemy Japan, as at the wartime ally the Soviet Union, delivered as a warning against post-war rivalry.
Kiffner further enunciates the suspicions of many historians alike, and how it is no wonder why they share a common interest since the days that Truman planned to have the bomb dropped were only days before the Soviets entered the Pacific War.
Peter Bastian adds to the subject by stating, the U.S. wanted to use its destructive new weapon to intimidate the Soviet Union, especially in Europe, and to end the Pacific War before the Russians became too heavily involved in East Asia.
This strategy that the president employed may have also reduced further disagreements between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, since it decreased their interactions and eradicated any possible disagreements about the path that the war should take.
However, a major side effect of this dramatic decision was it created a deadly arms race of nuclear weapons and created an unsteady relationship between the U.S. and Soviet Russia in the years following World War II.
The second idea that we're going to discuss today is the use of atomic bomb as a response to Pearl Harbor. After a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese suicide bombers, or the kamikaze, the U.S. seemed to be patiently waiting to get revenge on the Japanese, and the atomic bomb provided the utmost opportunity to do so.
After hearing of the results from the damage in Hiroshima, Truman often spoke bitter words about the bomb and its capabilities. He would say, "This is the greatest thing in history," as if he was blindsided with the vast amount of destruction and purely focusing on how much power the weapon of mass destruction had.
While no one can prove that Truman solely used the bomb to retaliate, it was definitely on his mind, especially when he stated the following: "Nobody is more disturbed over the use of the atomic bombs than I am, but I was greatly disturbed over the unwarranted attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor and their murder of our prisoners of war."
Here, Truman is defending his choice to use the bomb in response to a possible criticism. His punitive diction reveals his resentment towards the Japanese for the brutality against innocent Americans, and how this may or may have not been in consideration when deciding whether to drop the bomb.
Next, we will discuss the idea of racism. Racial differences have also been a hot topic concerning the atomic bomb and the rationale behind it.
Towards the end of World War II, the Americans categorized the war into two parts: the European, with Hitler being the enemy, and the Pacific, with the Japanese as the enemy.
In Germany, Hitler was distinguished from the whole population as the main enemy, while Japan, the entire population was considered the enemy. The racist ideas towards the Japanese came up strongly after the attacks on Pearl Harbor.
Historian John Dower supports this by stating, "During the war, the Japanese were often characterized as demons, savages, beasts, and subhumans. It has also been said that the mindset of the American soldier had changed. They had no mercy on the Japanese because they believed that they had no mercy on them, and the Japanese's unethical fighting tactics subconsciously installed fear in the back of the minds of the American soldier."
Americans also carried out heinous acts against the Japanese only, which reiterated the Americans' hatred towards the Japanese. This preconceived hatred may have made the decisions of dropping the atomic bomb a little easier, due to the lack of emotional connection between the civilians and the soldiers.
The American racism towards the Japanese after the unsuspecting attacks on Pearl Harbor perhaps made it an easier ethical decision to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Many historians also consider the ideas of racism, since it has been predicted that after the full-scale damage that was experienced at Hiroshima, the Japanese would have likely surrendered, thus making the bomb on Nagasaki unnecessary.
Whatever the true reasons for the second bomb may be, there is one thing for certain. Adding racism into the war was like picking favorites and added a whole new dimension, causing some countries to be more brutalized than others.